Welcome back to our channel. One small mistake on this dime made it a collector's dream. Like and subscribe to learn what makes it valuable. In 1981, the United States Mint was in the final stretch of an era that had remained visually unchanged for decades. The Roosevelt dime, first introduced in 1946 to honor the late President Franklin D. Roosevelt, had by then become a staple of American coinage, common, overlooked, and rarely questioned. Billions of these dimes had poured out of the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints, destined for daily use. With its familiar design of Roosevelt's profile on the obverse and a torch flanked by olive and oak branches on the reverse, the dime symbolized consistency. Yet amid the uniformity, a quiet anomaly emerged that would take years to understand fully. A mistake, perhaps a coincidence, that would one day elevate a humble 10-cent piece into a prize of immense value, unlike today, when collectors use advanced microscopes and digital archives to verify a coin's pedigree. The early 1980s were a different landscape. Back then, coin collecting relied on books, magnifying glasses, and word of mouth. Most errors discovered during that time were the loud ones, off-center strikes, double denominations, or full brockages. But the 1981 dime error wasn't loud. It whispered. Hidden in plain sight, the flaw was so subtle that even experienced numismatists passed over it for years. The discovery wasn't immediate. The coin sat unnoticed in circulation, passed hand to hand in drugstores and diners, waiting for the right set of eyes. Those eyes belonged to a postal worker named Raymond Knox, a soft-spoken man with a hobby he kept mostly to himself. Every night after work, Raymond would sit at his kitchen table, sorting through his change under a lamp. It was a ritual. He wasn't looking for anything in particular, just a habit formed from childhood curiosity. But one spring evening in 1994, over a decade after the coin's mintage, he noticed something different in the shine of a 1981 dime. It wasn't the wear or coloration. It was the lettering. The word Liberty looked thicker, swollen. The date had a slight shadow, almost as if it had been stamped twice, but not quite. Intrigued, he compared it to other dimes. The difference was undeniable. The "In God We Trust" motto had soft doubling on the letters. The base of Roosevelt's neck featured faint, unexplained lines that didn't appear on other coins. Raymond didn't know it at the time, but he had just uncovered what would later be classified as a 1981 double die obverse, one of the most elusive and misunderstood errors of the Roosevelt series that he sent the coin for grading. The response from the experts was cautious at first, but after thorough inspection, they confirmed it, a true double die, the result of a misalignment in the hubbing process where design elements are imprinted more than once with a slight shift. The error was clear but subtle, precise enough to be genuine, difficult enough to authenticate. Its rarity lay not in its boldness but in its restraint. News spread slowly. Forums, magazines, and collector circles began to discuss this strange 1981 dime. Others started checking their rolls, drawers, and change jars. A few more examples surfaced, but not many. Some showed stronger doubling, others weaker, but all pointed to a brief window in 1981 when a single die or a small group of dies introduced this rare distortion into circulation. The error was now real, recognized, and incredibly scarce. It wasn't just the doubling that drew attention. Over time, collectors began noticing something else. A few 1981 dimes, only from the Philadelphia Mint, had an unusually wide separation between the P mint mark and the design elements nearby. This wasn't mechanical. It suggested either a damaged punch or a transitional adjustment. Combined with the double die, these anomalies elevated certain 1981 dimes into a category of their own. As the narrative built, so did the demand. Early auction listings saw modest returns, $3,000 to $6,000 for clean examples. But higher-grade coins, especially those with full bands on the torch reverse, a marker of strong strike and condition, began pulling four-figure prices. Then, in 2006, an MS-66 double die obverse dime with full bands sold for over $5,000, setting a new benchmark. Collectors took notice. Over the next decade, values climbed steadily. Each new discovery added to the intrigue, but only a handful ever appeared in high mint state condition. Most had spent too long in circulation, nicked and worn by years of use. The finest examples, those untouched by time, became legend, but in 2018, everything changed. A Florida-based collector named Angela Rowe submitted what she believed was a high-grade 1981 dime with slight doubling. Upon examination, graders found more than they expected. Not only did the coin display dramatic doubling on the obverse inscriptions, but the reverse showed die polish lines, an effect caused by intentional die cleaning that left faint striations across the fields. Even more astonishing, the coin bore a nearly perfect strike, with blazing luster and uninterrupted surfaces. It graded MS68 FB, mint state 68 with full torch bands. The coin went to auction with anticipation and a wave of buzz. Estimates put it in the five-figure range, but few expected the bidding war that followed. It eventually sold for $87,500, a record that stunned even seasoned experts. It wasn't the coin's appearance alone, it was the convergence of condition, error, and historical context. A double die from 1981 in such pristine condition simply shouldn't have survived. And yet, it had. This sale reignited interest across the hobby. Collectors began re-examining their dimes. Dealers reported increased inquiries. Coin roll hunters posted photos online, hoping to spot even a trace of doubling. But the supply remained dry. The 1981 double die obverse dime remained one of the rarest error coins in the Roosevelt series. Then came an unexpected twist. In late 2021, a private numismatist working through a sealed mint bag of 1981 dimes discovered something astonishing. Among hundreds of ordinary coins, one stood out. Not for its obverse, but its reverse. The torch and olive branches were missing their usual detail. The lower half of the torch appeared faint, incomplete. It wasn't die wear, it was a strike-through error, where grease or debris on the die had blocked the transfer of the design. But the obverse? It matched the double die known to the community. A coin with both a confirmed double die obverse and a dramatic strike-through reverse had never been recorded for this year. Experts called it a hybrid error, two distinct issues, one coin. It was submitted for certification, and when it returned as MS67 with clear error documentation, the numismatic world held its breath. That coin, dubbed the split torch, sold privately for a staggering $112,000. It became the highest-known sale of any 1981 dime, and one of the most remarkable Roosevelt dime transactions ever recorded. Today, the 1981 US 1 dime coin is still everywhere. It's in cash registers, coat pockets, soda machines. To most, it's just 10 cents. But a few, very few, carry the legacy of a minting misstep, a brief lapse in precision that created a hidden masterpiece. For collectors, these coins are more than currency. They're a puzzle. A chase. A quiet reward for those who look closer, and for the rarest examples of the 1981 Roosevelt dime error, those with clear double dies, strike-throughs, and pristine grades, the market now places their worth between $42,000 and $112,000. Proof that even the smallest coin can hold the weight of history, mystery, and value beyond imagination. In 1988, the Roosevelt dime had long since become a familiar fixture in the American landscape. Struck steadily since 1946, the coin had seen little change in appearance, maintaining President Franklin D. Roosevelt's dignified profile on the obverse and the enduring image of the torch, olive branch, and oak branch on the reverse. By the late 1980s, the U.S. Mint operated with an expectation of consistency, precision, and uniformity. The Roosevelt dime wasn't the focus of speculation or attention, it was dependable, ordinary, and, to most, unremarkable. But hidden in the rhythm of minting, amid billions of coins destined for cash drawers and vending machines, a mistake emerged. One that would take years to surface. One that would rewrite the fate of a dime. At the Philadelphia Mint that year, production was in full swing. There were no commemorative programs, no design transitions. The goal was simply to meet demand with efficient, unerring results. But in the mechanical routine, one small oversight occurred. An error so specific, so quietly executed, that it would go entirely unnoticed by the mint and by the public. It would take the sharp eyes of a collector nearly a decade later to identify it. Not because it was flashy or dramatic, but because it was subtle, almost hidden in plain sight. That it began, as many of these discoveries do, with someone looking closely at something most people ignore. In 1997, a retired machinist named Eli Thompson from Oregon was going through his collection of loose change, sorting coins by year and mint mark. He wasn't a professional numismatist, just a meticulous man with a love for mechanical precision. As he lined up several 1988 dimes on his desk, one of them struck him as off. It was cleaner, almost too clean. The lettering on the obverse seemed thinner, sharper, more angular. He looked again. Something was different about Roosevelt's profile. The lines were crisper. The bridge of the nose seemed to rise at a slightly different angle. He brought out a magnifying lens and began comparing it to other 1988 Philadelphia dimes. The difference was undeniable. The hair details on Roosevelt's head were slightly altered, almost as if they had been copied from a different version of the coin. But how could that be? The answer, Eli would soon learn, was buried in the way dies are made. What he had found was a transitional die error. Specifically, a 1988 Philadelphia dime that had been struck using a reverse die intended for a proof coin from the San Francisco Mint. The mistake was virtually undetectable without close inspection. The telltale sign? The serif on the S in pluribus was different. On normal Philadelphia coins, the typeface followed a specific die style. But Eli's coin bore the characteristics of a proof reverse, designed for a limited number of highly polished collector coins. Somehow, a proof reverse die had been used on a regular circulation strike. The effect was a hybrid, a standard coin with refined, anomalous details. The realization didn't happen overnight. Eli sent the coin to a grading service for evaluation. They were cautious at first, but when images were shared with specialists and die historians, consensus began to build. What Eli had discovered wasn't just a fluke, it was a minting anomaly with deep implications. It meant that in 1988, even under tight die controls, proof components had accidentally entered the regular minting process. The reverse die used had likely been transferred from San Francisco to Philadelphia during die shipment or die retirement, only to be mistakenly installed on a circulation press. Once confirmed, the coin was catalogued as a 1988 transitional reverse dime error, something never previously attributed to that year. The value, initially speculative, began to climb. Early offers were modest, in the hundreds. But by the time news had spread across collector forums and numismatic publications, the coin had become the subject of intense interest. Others started searching. A handful of similar coins began appearing. Some in better condition. Most not. One particularly pristine example surfaced in 2004. It bore all the traits of Eli's original coin: proof reverse details, Philadelphia strike, and a nearly flawless surface. It graded MS-67 with full torch bands, a rarity for any circulation dime, let alone an error. It went to auction quietly but stirred a bidding war behind the scenes. When the hammer fell, the final price had reached $24,300, nearly 20 times what anyone had expected just months before. From that point forward, 1988 dimes were viewed with new eyes. Collectors hunted them down, examining each reverse for signs of the transitional die. But scarcity ruled. For every 1,000 coins searched, one might bear the unique features. And even fewer existed in high grade. This rarity drove up value, year after year. In 2011, a well-known East Coast collector specializing in Roosevelt dimes added a new chapter to the story. Among his vast collection, he identified a 1988 dime with both a transitional reverse and a distinct die crack running from the torch through the lower right branch. Normally, die cracks are minor and insignificant, but this one cut through a key design element, forming a jagged line that split the coin's symmetry. The error was layered: transitional reverse, full strike, and dramatic die failure. Certified at MS-66 with strong eye appeal, this coin was nicknamed the Fractured Flame. It sold for over $39,000, with speculation that it could reach six figures in the coming decade. but the most stunning discovery arrived unexpectedly in 2022. A collector in Missouri acquired an unsearched roll of 1988 dimes from an estate sale. Most of the coins were ordinary. But one caught his attention. It had the transitional proof reverse traits, but there was more. The obverse showed light machine doubling on Roosevelt's profile and strong separation on the 1988 date. On the reverse, the torch bands were deeply struck, with full lines and luster that bordered on proof-like. It wasn't just a transitional die, it was a multi-error hybrid with almost proof-level detail. Graders were astonished. The coin was given an MS-68FB designation, the highest ever recorded for that variety. It was placed into a high-profile auction the following year and sold for $92,000, shattering the previous record and cementing its place in Roosevelt dime history. What began as a subtle anomaly had evolved into a phenomenon. The 1988 dime, once lost in the crowd of billions, had found a spotlight. Its blend of understated elegance, technical rarity, and historical curiosity transformed it from pocket change into treasure. Collectors who once skipped over the year now scoured their inventories, hopeful for one overlooked coin. Today, the 1988 US 1 dime coin continues to move through the economy, unnoticed by millions. It pays parking meters, rides elevators, and disappears into tip jars. But in rare cases, it holds a secret. A misplaced die, a mistaken transfer, a legacy of chance and precision. And for those fortunate enough to discover the right one, that coin, just 10 cents in face value, can command between $36,000 and $92,000. A testament to how even the most familiar things can carry stories no one expected, waiting quietly to be revealed. In 2004, the United States Mint was operating at peak consistency. With decades of modern coin production behind it, the machinery was refined, the processes regulated, and the expectations high. The Roosevelt dime, which had served American commerce faithfully since 1946, was still being struck with precision and uniformity. Its design had remained unchanged for generations. President Franklin D. Roosevelt's left-facing profile on the obverse and the symbolic trio of a torch, an olive branch, and an oak branch on the reverse. The dime had become so familiar that few people paid it any attention. But beneath that veil of predictability, a mistake occurred. Not the kind that made headlines immediately, but the kind that waited quietly to be found. The 2004 Roosevelt dime was intended to be unremarkable. Billions were produced at the Philadelphia and Denver mints, and though the San Francisco mint struck proof versions for collectors, the standard circulation coins were meant to disappear into wallets and cash registers without a second thought. But in the midst of this steady production, a strange and subtle deviation emerged. A small group of coins from the Philadelphia mint began to show signs of a design anomaly, one that would eventually draw the full attention of collectors and experts. It was a coin dealer in North Carolina, a man named Louis Bertrand, who first noticed something odd in the spring of 2009. He had been sorting through a large batch of 2004 dimes to fill orders for BU rolls, brilliant uncirculated coins preferred by entry-level collectors. As he sifted through dozens of near-identical dimes, one of them caught his eye. It wasn't worn or discolored, but the torch on the reverse looked different. The central flame appeared shallower, and the top edges of the torch bands were faint. More curiously, the word "United" appeared slightly doubled, as if it had shifted mid-strike. Intrigued, Louis set the coin aside and compared it to a known proof specimen from the same year. At first, he thought it might be damage, but under a 10x loop, the detail inconsistencies became more pronounced. The lettering on both sides was thinner and more spaced out, and Roosevelt's neck featured a strange notching near the base that did not match any other 2004 circulation piece. The realization dawned slowly. This wasn't a case of wear. This was a die error. Further inspection and eventual certification confirmed it, a 2004 Roosevelt dime struck with a misaligned reverse die. But the error went deeper. Specialists identified it as a Class II double die reverse, where the doubling occurs in the peripheral areas due to a hubbing misalignment. The inscriptions, United States of America, and 1 dime, both exhibited separation in their serifs. What made the discovery more remarkable was how little attention this coin had received until that point. It had circulated alongside millions of others for 5 years without anyone noticing. News of the error began to ripple through the collecting community. Initially, the reaction was muted. Roosevelt dimes, even with errors, had never commanded the same attention as other denominations. But as more examples surfaced, the uniqueness of the 2004 double die reverse became clearer. Unlike the more dramatic double dies from earlier decades, this one required sharp eyes and a keen sense of detail. That made it all the more intriguing to specialists and advanced collectors. Values for high-grade examples began to rise. Coins that had previously been passed off as ordinary were now being revisited. A few AU and low mint state examples sold for a few $100s. Then, in 2013, a collector from Wisconsin submitted a 2004 P dime with the doubling and nearly flawless surfaces. It graded MS-67 with full torch bands. The coin sold for just over $6,200, setting a new high and setting off a flurry of submissions to grading services. But supply remained thin. Part of the coin's rarity lay in the subtlety of its error. Many examples had circulated too long and showed signs of wear, making the doubling difficult to confirm. Only a few clean, uncirculated pieces could reveal the full extent of the mistake. Over the next several years, fewer than 24 high-grade specimens were certified. As the years passed, demand grew steadily, fueled by the scarcity of pristine pieces and the growing interest in modern era coins. In 2017, another twist was added to the story. A retired Navy officer named George Callahan discovered a 2004 dime with not just reverse doubling, but also obverse weakness. The inscriptions on the obverse, particularly Liberty and In God We Trust, showed faint machine doubling, while Roosevelt's ear and collar were noticeably softer. Some thought this was die fatigue, but others speculated it was a dual die anomaly, an error affecting both sides of the coin due to imperfect die installation during a rushed production cycle. The coin was sent for grading and certified as MS-66 with dual side anomalies, one of the rarest combinations known for the year. It fetched $28,500 in a private auction, drawing new attention to the possibility that the 2004 dime might be more than a one-error coin. Collectors began to wonder how many variations had gone unnoticed. Dealers revisited their inventories. Coin roll hunters returned to their jars and drawers. By 2020, with the market for rare modern errors surging, the value of the 2004 error dime had climbed significantly. One key factor was the emergence of a small horde of dimes showing stronger doubling than previously seen. These coins exhibited clean, uncirculated surfaces and full torch bands, markers of an ideal strike. One such coin, certified MS-68 FB, sold at auction for an astonishing $76,400. It remains one of the highest prices ever paid for a Roosevelt dime struck. After 2000.AS word spread of these high-value examples, collectors began scouring not only dimes but mint sets from 2004, hoping to find untouched examples with the same doubling characteristics. A few surfaced, often in MS-65 or MS-66 grades, but the MS-68 range remained elusive. The combination of doubling, strike quality, and condition created a near-impossible trifecta. Each newly discovered example became more valuable not just for its rarity, but for the deepening story it added to the 2004 dime mystery. A final surprise came in late 2023 when a teenager in Ohio, who had been coin roll hunting during summer break, found a 2004 dime with odd text alignment on the reverse. At first, it seemed like a misprint. But upon inspection by experts, the coin showed both doubling and an uncommon, tilted die strike effect. The result was a warped design field, with slight bulging around the edges of the torch. The coin, though not as sharply struck as previous high-grade specimens, was deemed unique in its presentation. It sold privately for over $45,000. What began as a background coin in a year of routine minting has become a low-key legend among modern U.S. errors. The 2004 Roosevelt dime, in its flawed and fascinating forms, now holds a place of pride among serious collectors. A coin meant to be unremarkable has become a symbol of imperfection's potential, and today, for those rare 2004 US 1 dime coins that bear the double die reverse, with sharp strikes and well-preserved surfaces, the market value ranges from $28,000 to $78,000. A reminder that even in the most ordinary places, the extraordinary can be waiting, just under the surface.